Right, I'm back again. Thank you to the guys before for logging me in. I've just about made it in due to roadworks. Yeah, you're listening to Ramadan Radio Wolverhampton. We present a legal clinic once a week for you every Sunday. We try and, sorry, I'm still out of breath. We try and cover as many different topics as possible and keep you up to date on the latest legal knowledge, legal updates that we, whether it's employment, whether it's immigration, whether it's crime, anything that is relevant, we try and cover. Now, what I want from you guys is I want you guys to text in with any topics that you feel you want covered. So we've covered wills and probate, we've covered family, divorce and child contact, we've touched on adoption. So we've covered many areas. We've covered employment as well previously, and we have covered immigration. We tend to update you on regularly whenever there is an update. There seem to be regular updates due to COVID-19. So if anyone wants any topic covered, anything that you wish for us to discuss, I'm happy to bring on specialists in that area. I have many contacts who I'm sure would do the favor and come on and explain those areas to you. So the WhatsApp number to text is 074 404 204 32. Today's show, we will be going through some more employment advice and guidance, I should say. And then we will be moving on to a few items from the legal news. Interesting scenarios, maybe interesting topics, but a bit more light-hearted than just throwing the law at you. So we again have on the show with me today, I have on the phone, I have Gavin Ward, who is a commercial and employment solicitor and local to us here. Gavin, are you with us?
Hi there, Ajaz. You okay?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well.
Good. Well, thank you, Gavin, for coming and spending time with us again and to help us understand the latest in employment law, I believe today we're discussing. So, yeah, how have you been?
Sorry, can you repeat that, Ajaz?
How have you been?
I'm very well, thanks. I'm very well. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. Just rushed for time. I was you can probably hear I'm still out of breath. There was roadworks and diversions.
From the car.
Yeah, I almost thought I wasn't going to make the show on time. But my colleagues from the show before helped and logged me in, ready.
Saved the day.
Saved the day, definitely. They're the heroes of the day for me. Right, Gavin. So, as for employment law, so are there any other updates now, or there was something you mentioned to me previously about working safely during coronavirus?
Yeah, so I think the biggest change that's come in was more of an announcement than any kind of official guidance at the moment. So on Friday,
Gavin, could you do me a favor? Is it possible for you to get closer to the mic at all?
Oh.
It's a bit,
just
I believe our listeners might struggle a bit.
Yeah, just bear with me a moment. How's that? Is that any better?
That's much better. Much better.
Okay. Right, no problem. I was trialing an earpiece there, but I think that probably failed for today. Right. So, in terms of changes that have come up now since Friday, the Prime Minister announced that he wanted to start moving some of the responsibility for how employees will work in the workplace back to the employers rather than there being guidance on the working from home as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be one of the main elements to the changes that were being brought in. So that's going to be a case from the 1st of August. Employers will have more latitude in terms of whether the employees work from home or whether they work from their premises where they're
Right.
usually ordinarily
Whereas
do their job.
previously the emphasis was on, well, if they can work from home, they should work from home. Now
Yeah.
now it's more on the employer. If they wish for them to work from the office, they can insist on it, I assume.
Well, I think it's more a case of saying to them that it's up to the employer to make a decision on it,
Mm-hmm.
providing they can provide a safe environment for them to work in, rather than saying that everyone should now start to go back to the workplace rather than working at home.
Mm-hmm.
I think for a lot of people, working from home's worked quite well. And it may well be that for some businesses it works out rather well in the future. I know Slater and Gordon is going to be closing its London office and allowing everyone there to be working from home in the future. And I believe they're operating a similar policy with other branches as well, where they'll be allowing quite a lot of staff to be able to work from home in the future. So at least in the legal field, there's a number of law firms out there that are starting to take a different view in terms of whether or not they need large premises and facilities, and whether or not it's better to just do a lot of this remotely and perhaps organise different sort of client meeting facilities instead.
So I
That
assume.
might be more.
So maybe the businesses that will do well out of this are serviced offices, because if people are going to give up on their larger premises and then move to maybe smaller serviced offices, which reduce the costs, obviously, and allowing their staff to work from home, and maybe hot desk when they come in. That might be the future for a lot of businesses.
Commercial rents are huge for businesses, particularly, say, if you've got a large office in the middle of Spinningfields in Manchester, or you've got a city centre-based office in Birmingham or in London, then the rents there are huge, and comparably so are the business rates as a result of it. So if you can potentially reduce the size of the estate down for the firm or the other business, whichever it might be, then you're saving on costs there, and that in turn might also help you return some of that saving back to potential consumers.
Mm-hmm.
So that always could be quite helpful. But effectively, it's going to be down to the employers to decide, and some roles probably are better suited to be dealt with in an office environment with a team of people around you potentially. So it's not always going to be the case that every job is suitable for a home working environment, and that I think is why the government turned around and said that actually it's going to be a point of discretion for employers, and they should engage with their employees on how best they work, whether that's going to be from home or from the workplace.
Sure.
But they're no longer suggesting that it has to be guidance that wherever possible you should be working from home.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose that's probably because there are some employers out there that may have at least partially struggled with that to some extent. I know I've heard success stories out there, but I'm sure there are stories out there where it's been more of a logistical difficulty, or perhaps even a greater expense in terms of IT for them.
I think even law firms, yes, as far as our IT is concerned, we've got case management systems in place, so we can technically work from everywhere. But it was still having to deal with the post, having to make sure someone's there to scan it in, and then sending the letters out, reports out. Sometimes they're 3, 4, 500 page bundles, maybe more. That's where I think places like ours struggled.
Yeah, and I think that's probably where a lot of law firms are going to struggle, and perhaps some of their facilities and estates will change their focus a little bit more, and they'll be more administrative focused to some extent, and they'll be more facilities focused for access to clients, rather than being sort of physical workplaces for solicitors or their paralegals.
Yeah. So meeting rooms basically.
Yeah, so there'll be a lot more perhaps meeting room space, that sort of thing.
I suppose meeting room and
Um,
admin.
yeah, I'm wondering if that might be the training direction for it, but I
Mm.
suppose we'll have to wait and see how that might sort of unfold and how that might look.
Mm.
But everyone's, at the moment, according to ACAT, and is still the case on the Health and Safety Executive website, their guidance hasn't yet been updated. So I suspect this has been a case of the Prime Minister making an announcement on the 17th of July, but there being actually no physical guidance and government guidance to back it all up yet to say what employers are supposed to do. So at the moment, all of the existing rules around this are still there to be followed.
Mm.
If you take away the fact that those still say that you should work from home where you can, the other guidance is to avoid busy commuting times on public transport, where travel is essential, wear face coverings, washing your hands regularly. There should be employees should be conducting a risk assessment to make sure that they take all reasonable steps to protect their employees or any visitors really
Yeah.
that might be attending their premises, either whether they're a customer, a client, or whether they're a worker, or if they're, say, even just someone delivering some parcels to them. Really, they've got to make sure that there's what's known as a COVID secure environment for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So following the government guidance on safer working is really important.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. I was thinking of our own office, what we've done and what we need to do. So yeah, we can have a discussion later on that. Um, right. Okay. And I suppose there's cleaning and hygiene advice as well.
Yeah, I mean the HSE's got the Health and Safety Executive, that is, they've
Mm.
got quite useful advice on their website. So as part of this COVID-19 risk assessment or COVID secure guidelines for that, they sort of divide up the advice a little bit into different segments. So there's cleaning and hygiene, so that's how to clean your workplace and reduce the risk from coronavirus.
Okay.
There's personal protective equipment and fit testing and respiratory and protective equipment advice. So that's more advice in the health and social care and non-healthcare work.
Mm.
And there's risk assessments, obviously, for the COVID secure side of things. Social distancing in the workplace, so that's making sure that employees are sufficiently distanced. Now, the rules around that did change slightly recently, so the 2-meter rule is still supposed to be observed wherever it's possible, but when it's not possible, it's 1 meter plus with mitigation.
Sure.
So that mitigation might be a face mask, a visor. It might be the positioning of people's desks so that perhaps people aren't necessarily breathing in the same direction as someone else's. So the airflow isn't necessarily
All right. Okay.
pushing contaminants around, that sort of stuff.
Mm.
So you might choose to position people's desks in a certain way or at a certain distance from one another. Also, you'll need to make sure that people are being properly supervised if they are working from home as well, that they've got all the necessary equipment that they'll need, that their stress is being managed, because I suppose if you're not in the workplace and you don't see them and speak to them as regularly, you may not quite realise the stresses and pressures that they're under from the job so much because the distance may not allow you to realise that so much. So having regular check-ins can help there with that.
So what if someone doesn't want to return to back to their workplace then?
Yeah, so I suppose there's going to be a category of people, or quite a lot of people, who will be naturally quite worried about catching the virus. There's going to be people who are living with someone who's currently shielding, so that's people who are of an at-risk bracket, whether that's because of personal health conditions which are causing difficulties, or because they live with somebody that's quite elderly and therefore susceptible to more severe illness. They might have childcare arrangements, which with schools being largely closed at the moment until September, that makes things a little more tricky for them. And you might also have people themselves being at higher risk of severe illness if they were to catch the virus. So there could be a lot of worries and concerns there, and I think employers should probably expect to hear those worries and concerns rather than it being the exception. I think they should probably expect it to be more the rule to it, really, and maybe if they are going to start to look at asking people to return from home working and returning to the office, there needs to be a scale of proper engagement there with the workforce to ensure that they are properly involved in how it will happen and how it will be planned out. So they'll want to know how they'll return to work, what sort of travel arrangements there might be. So if there's a lot of people that are reliant on public transport and they're coming into central London, it might be a case that people have staggered start times or finish times to accommodate. It might be reduced hours in the office with more working from home on other days, where it might be a bit more tricky. You take people through the risk assessment so they understand all the various things. So it might be a simple case of you can't make somebody a cup of tea in the workplace because that one person has touched the cup and has then passed it to someone else, and they may or may not have that virus. And it's just little things like that, really, where normal niceties that you may or may not be able to do anymore. You might have one-way systems through your workplace, so you can only enter through one way and go up the stairs. But if you wanted to then come back down the exit, you may have to use a different set of stairs and walk through a different way to make sure you aren't passing people in the corridor and keeping a sensible distance from one another. So there could be all kinds of things there. You might hand sanitizers, I think, at entrances are quite commonplace, particularly in shops at the moment. I think everyone's getting used to going in, having some hand sanitizer, washing their hands with it, then walking on through and carrying on. I think a similar situation will be happening in offices quite a lot as well. I suspect people probably be bringing in their own hand sanitizer too. I know I keep some in the car just in case.
Yeah, I've got about 4 bottles in the car.
Yeah. But people who have got legitimate concerns over this, so people are at a high risk of catching a severe illness there. So say if you've got a workforce that includes a couple of people that are, I don't know, mid-60s, or maybe you've got somebody who might be 70 or something like that working for you, or you've got somebody who's just got some sort of medical condition which could cause them to be a bit more severely impacted by it, perhaps a severe version of asthma or something like that. You might want them, if they can, to continue to work from home, because under your risk assessment as an employer, you might think if they do catch it and they catch it from the workplace, then we could be placing them at more significant risk. And the employer does have an obligation there to ensure a safe workplace for their employees. So it goes both ways, really, on that one. In terms of caring for children, I mean, under normal circumstances, employers might allow an employee some unpaid leave to collect a child, or to say take a day to look after them if there was a teacher training day or something like that, or if some unusual circumstance crops up.
Well, for the immediate future, I suppose everyone, are all schools broken up now? I believe maybe, but if not,
yeah, possibly have actually, because we're coming towards the end of July now, aren't we? So
exactly.
I don't know if they broke up Friday or whether.
I know mine did last week. So week before the week just gone. So, but they tend to have longer holidays than most.
They do, and I think a lot of parents as well, they take a lot of time off around now, don't they? So it's usually one parent will take so much time off and the parent will take off some other time. There's usually somebody around for the kids over the 6 weeks holiday.
Absolutely,
where the traffic's a little lighter on the road, I think.
Yeah.
During this period over summer.
So you were mentioning the supporting staff who need to self-isolate, and so, what about businesses which, some businesses are looking to open soon, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
25th, is it 25th of July?
There are some new businesses that will be back open on the 25th of July. That's going to be the indoor gyms and dance studios and fitness centres. There'll be sports courts and facilities, so I imagine that's things like indoor tennis courts, squash courts, that sort of stuff.
I don't
really
think
leisure centre based.
Yeah,
water parks and swimming pools.
if I'd be a bit, I wouldn't be so well up for taking my children to a water park at this moment in time. For some reason, although I know the children would love it, but I think that the water parks will suffer business wise because of this, and gyms also.
Yeah, so if I give you an example of the gym group, then they've made an offer to their existing members that they can freeze their membership for free for another month, so freezing it until the 25th of August. I've done that. I'm not ready to go back just yet, not because I don't want to go and keep fit, but because I don't want to go and catch the virus. And I'm just not entirely confident that what they'll have put in place will be enough.
Yeah.
To see it through. Because I just sort of think to myself, you've got there racks of dumbbells, lots of them.
Sure.
And yes, all of the benches are all set out rather well spaced, and they're set out in a way where they're not to be moved, and that's all fine. But people will pick up and put down dumbbells irregularly. And the cleaning equipment that I've seen that they've shown on their website only really shows it at the front of the gym. So I can't really see in a rather long gym people walking down to the bottom, queuing up to wait for a sprayer and a few bits of paper toweling to clean down some dumbbells. So we just don't necessarily see that happening.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem to me like there's quite enough being done to make sure that it will be entirely safe. And if you're on a treadmill, or if you're on a cross trainer, or if you're on the exercise bikes, if you're doing a lot of cardio, then you're going to be breathing in and out quite deeply.
Quite deeply, yes.
Quite quickly, and that could be getting you quite a high dose of the virus if you happen to be unfortunately in the vicinity of it. So it just seems to be, to me at the moment, too high a risk.
Yeah, but I agree with you.
It depends on what the government and the medical advisors seem to think there, doesn't it? Because I think SAGE is there giving the medical advice to the government, and that's the end of their remit there, is they will set out what the science is and what the medical knowledge is in terms of it and their recommendations, and then policy is made up by the politicians who aren't necessarily so medically
knowledgeable, trained. I suppose the politicians make it a business decision, isn't it, really? So as long as they put something in place to say that they are doing something for that could be the reason. Get the businesses back on their feet.
I worry to some extent that they'll say that it's just going to be the public's fault in the end for not following the guidance, and they'll say that they tried something, wasn't that enough for you? I just don't necessarily see it myself as being entirely right for the gym to open. I mean, I'd be very happy for gyms to open. If it was safe to do so, I'd be happy to go. But in the here and now, I think I want to see how it goes for the first month and hear what the stories are like about it, and then I'll determine for myself. If infection rates start to go up by the end of next month, then I won't be. I'll probably be cancelling rather than carrying on with the gym.
And there's further, I think on the 1st of August, there's bowling alleys and skating rinks, casinos and conference centres will be open again. So, I sometimes go to a few, legal conferences, so I'm not too sure whether I will be this year. But I guess they're all, due to open again. But there's still some businesses which will have to remain closed.
There's some businesses that are going to have to remain closed. So some things like indoor play areas and soft play, nightclubs, dance halls, discotheques, sexual entertainment venues, and hostess bars. They all have to remain closed for the moment. I mean, nightclubs, I suppose, is a more extreme version of the pub, isn't it, really, where everyone's already probably quite drunk when they get there, so the likelihood of any kind of social distancing is negligible.
But with the indoor play areas, wouldn't you class them, because if the children are allowed back to school, so they've been playing in the school playgrounds yes, they've had smaller bubbles, but still the bubbles changed every day. So they've had contact with other children,
Yeah.
and then we're also saying that indoor swimming pools aren't to be opened. We're also saying that bowling alleys, indoor skating rings, all that is to be open. So again, children will visit these venues. They'll touch those
I agree.
bowling balls. It's all. So what's the difference between the indoor play area? You know?
I don't understand it either, and
Yeah.
it would be interesting to know why they've managed to distinguish indoor play areas and soft play areas when, if two kids are playing squash in a squash court, they're still in a confined
Of
area
course, of
and they're
course.
still going to be playing.
Well,
The same
let's leave that.
if they're playing tennis.
Let's leave that there. I've got 10 seconds before the break. We'll continue on the furlough changes after the break. And I also have a question from a listener which we need to answer. So come back after the break. Thank you very much.
Super. You know, the question is. So has this chap been trying to engage with the plumber who had fitted his bathroom then in the back, and he's not being helpful towards fixing it? Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then you might want to say to him, look, you either make reasonable effort to come around here and fix it, or get someone else to make the cost back. So, I mean, he would have rights under the Consumer Rights Act there for the products and services that he's required to work properly, and he should be able to expect that the plumber will have fitted them using his best endeavours to do that. But okay. Yeah, so I've got the BBC one for the e-scooter. Yeah, and I've got one for the Man City stuff as well. It's up to you. I know my mum's a Man United fan, so she's not going to be overly chuffed. But to be fair, though, I suppose you're going to be happy with any solicitor that's managed to get you a reduction of $20 million worth of fines and back into European football. I think anyone's going to be happy with that as a result. Yeah. Well, I suppose if they're getting into similar trouble, they might want to. This solicitor that got struck off, though, I mean, he's a bit stupid, isn't he? Do you reckon? The gammy solicitor from Cheshire. Yeah, you might as well. I mean, it really is important for lawyers to be understanding what sort of funds are coming from in these things, and not to knowingly allow others to go. Sure. Do you want to do the solicitor bit
Good.
first, then the e-scooters, Man United, and then the rate
Yeah.
stuff, or do you want to end on a more
Well,
happy note?
we're live again, Gavin. So, yeah, welcome back after the break. I'm Ajaz Ali, and with me I have Gavin Ward. We were discussing employment law and the changes that have come about or are coming about in the next few weeks. Now, moving on to let's talk a little bit about the furlough changes, Gavin,
Yeah.
which are coming about on the 1st of August. I know we covered something similar to this a few weeks back, but just as a recap, quickly, if we can go through that before we move on to the question which Sister Naseem has asked. Yeah, Gavin,
Sure.
what are the changes on for furlough?
So, one of the changes from the 1st of August in terms of furlough, and I think what's probably important to encapsulate for all the changes that are now going to come forward with furlough is that any employees that are remaining on furlough and are just continually furloughed throughout the rest of the process until the end of October, you still receive up to 80% of your salary to the cap of £2,500. The difference really isn't so much for the individual employee as it is for the employer himself or themselves. And from August, the employers must pay the national insurance and pension contributions of the 80% that is claimed.
Mm-hmm.
So that won't be claimable in addition anymore. The employers are going to have to start to find that expense. From September, the government grant will go from 80% to 70%, meaning that employers will also then have to find that gap of 10%. So the new cap effectively will go from being up to a maximum of £2,500 to £2,190, and the employer will also be paying the national insurance contributions and pension contributions and that 10% of wages.
Right.
In October as well, that will then reduce further will reduce down to being 60% of wages to a cap of £1,875 plus national insurance contributions and pension contributions. So effectively meaning that employers will be contributing 20% of the up to 80% of the wages up to the cap of £2,500 and the national insurance contributions and pension contributions for the employees. So it's gradually starting to return responsibility for paying the salaries for these individuals to the employers, probably focusing the employers' minds a little bit more on whether or not these people are ever going to be returned to work as well, and whether or not they're going to be needed down the line. And it might well be that business picks up a lot more in September and they are required to return, or it might just be that they're in hard-hit areas of hospitality and aviation, which we've already seen vast redundancies in. Things aren't likely to necessarily pick up in aviation for a long time. And it might well be that people are being made redundant, but airlines are larger businesses and their consultation periods for redundancies will be longer as a result if they want to make large-scale redundancies. And they'll have to start consulting sooner rather than later, I would have thought, in terms of dealing with that, particularly if they want to mitigate their own costs, which will start to escalate as the furlough scheme is starting to be withdrawn.
I mean, the businesses that you mentioned that would be might be affected are quite large businesses, and yes, they already quite a few have been affected, and we can already see that some of these airlines will be going into administration and are going into administration. However, the smaller businesses could be affected as well, I suppose. Those indoor play areas that you mentioned earlier, if they're only starting, well, they remain closed for now, and then obviously that might be affected. If the bowling alleys, okay, they open up in 1st of August, but if people don't attend, they have to keep people on furlough, and again they have to pay out more out their own pocket then.
Yeah, and I suppose it's difficult too because certain businesses may or may not have furloughed large amounts of staff. So people like hospitality, pubs, hotels, aviation, that sort of stuff,
Mm.
they'll definitely have put people on furlough. Well, more likely to put people on furlough before the end of June.
Yeah.
And as you might recall from our last chat about furlough, that there was going to be a moratorium there. So if you hadn't previously been on furlough after the first of July, you couldn't then go onto furlough again for the first time.
That's
You
right.
could only be re-furloughed if you'd been previously furloughed.
Yeah.
So it creates a difficulty there where employers may have to make decisions which are quite final for people as well, so that the options to furlough staff could become more limited
Absolutely.
as they go down the line. But you're quite right as well. If you look at the aviation sector particularly as well, there's suppliers to that. So there's the ground crews for it. There's the people who supply the catering to them, maintain the aircraft. There's all kinds of different areas of supply chain there, even for the cleaning of the aircraft. And it's all potentially going to be affected as a result of the reduction in work, effectively. So there's less flights and there's less need for everything else that goes around it. And that's a tricky spot for them all to be in. And I suppose it's similar for people who are operating, say, hospitality or the soft play businesses, because they'll have cleaners and they'll have businesses who would service their requirements, provide them with supplies of foods and drinks and things that they might sell. And all of that demand will dry up as well because they've been closed for longer and there's no one buying it. Or if they are reopening, people are going to be very cautious about getting back out there because the virus is still prevalent.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's always going to be a worry to people.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. That, and I'm not sure how long, how long the economy can survive. Oh well.
It's going through a vast restructure, isn't it? We've had John Lewis and Boots announce redundancies, and Boots is a bit of a surprising one because they were trading throughout the pandemic. They were one of the businesses who were deemed to be essential, and they were allowed to carry on, primarily because they provided pharmacy services for lots of people. And I think they also helped provide some of the external testing centres as well for the government.
They did, yes.
But they're now making 7% of their workforce redundant.
Wow.
So is quite staggering, really, when you think about
Concerning.
it. They're quite a large employer.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the question that we have here that was WhatsApped in. And before we do so, I would like to ask any listeners who have any legal questions. I think other than crime, we've got between Gavin and I think we've got most of the other areas covered as far as our legal knowledge is concerned. So if you have any questions, please WhatsApp the studio. The number to WhatsApp is 074 404 20432. And if you wish for me to discuss any topics in a later show, next week, week after, in fact, next week, I'm hopefully returning to Black Lives Matter. We did do a show about a month ago on that topic and didn't feel that it did it justice. So I wish to return to that topic. So please listen in next week for that. But any topics that you wish, any legal topics that you wish for me to discuss, please WhatsApp and we'll try and discuss. And if you have any questions, please do so. Now, the question that I have for you, Gavin, by a listener by the name of Sister Naseem, she said, I had my bathroom done out last year by a company in Wolverhampton. I have continued to have a leak under my shower tray. The plumber has continued to try and solve the problem. To this day, and it's been a year, what are my rights as the customer? Because now they are not being kind to me. Should I contact trading standards because I still have a leaking bathroom and now watermarks are showing on my living room ceiling? So that's the question. I think there's a few elements to this question, aren't there, Gavin? I think we need to establish whether the plumber is employed by the bathroom company, or is this an
Yeah.
external plumber that is trying to solve
Yeah,
the
so
problem?
it'll be whoever she's contracted with as the consumer contracting with a particular business for
Yeah.
that. So it might well be that it's
Who
a
fitted the
local
bathroom
plumber,
first?
or it could be Plum Store or someone like that. Not that I'm obviously naming any particular firm. That was just an example. But,
Yeah.
it could be any particular company. So whoever she contracted with for the services, see, they were the supplier of services to a consumer. So she has rights under the Consumer Rights Act of 2015 to ensure that the products and services that she's been supplied with work as
Mm.
she expected them to. They should work for their intended purpose. They should be fit for their purpose. And the service should be right. So that if the shower tray's been fitted and it is leaking, then it shouldn't be leaking. It should be fixed, and the plumber should come out to rectify that mistake.
Okay.
And it shouldn't
The
come at a cost to her.
the listener has now said she's sent another message saying that plumber is contracted by the company.
Okay, so it's a subcontractor in that respect. So it might well be that she needs to speak to the company that had she contracted with, really, to get this sorted out. The plumber directly will be contracting with that company, so they can then turn around to the plumber and tell him or her to come back and remedy it, or they might opt to send a completely different plumber around.
I would try and insist, if it's been a year and he's been back several times, I would
Yeah,
first protocol would be, well, how about you send someone else out? This
I think that's a good
this
idea.
guy
Yeah.
has not been able to solve the problem. He fitted it. He's not been able to solve the problem in a year. You guys have you have a
They've got
contract.
a duty of care to
Yeah,
ensure
duty
that
of care.
the contract is fulfilled properly, haven't they?
Yeah. So
And then
apparently they're not
in the
interested in doing so, in sending anyone else out. That's what um, the listener is listening to us and typing as we speak, I suppose. Um, I've tried, as you have said, right? Okay. So she's tried to contact the bathroom company, and they've not really, other than sending the same person out, I guess, on numerous occasions, they've not been listening. And now, I guess, because it's been a year as well, they probably think that, well, we've done what we can. But the question is, have they?
No, I don't think so. I don't think the elapsed time helps them at all, because the problem's been raised with them previously and it's still not fixed. So the problem continues and the problem needs to be fixed. So it's not good enough for them to say, well, we've tried over the span of a year and it's not working out. So yes, if she wanted to raise it with trading standards, she could do.
Mm-hmm.
That is an option to her, and they will investigate them potentially and look into it further. But it might be better for her to also seek some quotes from alternative plumbers for the remedial work on it, so that that plumber can say, this is the work that needs to be fixed, this is the problem, and this is how much it will cost. And then provide that quote to them and say, look, I'm willing to have this plumber do it, but you need to pay the cost of repairing it and putting it right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she could, if she wanted to, potentially, take that to the small claims court if she wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah. So seek legal
She could do a
recourse.
money claim online and she could claim that money back, provided she could say categorically that this was the problem with the bathroom. They tried to remedy it over a course of a year and they'd refused to do anything more with it. She's then gone out and got a quote for the work that needs to get done and the price for it, and she has that work. She gives them the option to either pay the money for it to be done or agree to pay for it, at which point she pays for it and then recovers it from them on an invoice.
Mm-hmm.
And then she can take it to court if they refused
Yeah.
to pay for it. But ultimately, if it's causing stains on her ceilings, if it's damaging her property, there's potentially further claims there for the redecorating in any case, because you can't have a ceiling that's been stained with water damage, and there could be other sources of damp, I suppose.
Of course. Yeah.
It's something that perhaps the plumber might look at and say, there's other ancillary damage as a result of them not properly fixing this. So there is always the court route to consider as well. But, there's nothing stopping you reporting it to trading standards too, so they can investigate matters. And it might well be that an intervention by trading standards would be helpful and would persuade them to actually do what's right. But I would recommend that she seeks out an alternative plumber herself to get a quote.
A quote is, vital.
Yeah, and to show what's wrong with it as well, because it's showing a professional showing that the job hasn't been done properly, and they haven't fixed it properly, so it's just not good enough. And that level of pressure sometimes is enough to get them to maybe send round a separate plumber to get it fixed as well. You never know; they might opt for that choice too.
I mean, it sounds like a dodgy washer, to be honest, but I'm not a plumber.
Yeah, I'm going to say I'm going to stay away from that one because I don't know I don't know anything about plumbing, so
No,
I call the plumber if there's a problem.
I think there's with shower cubicles, there's height issues sometimes. Sometimes it has to be raised slightly. So I'm not sure what's happened in there. Anyhow, as I said, I'm not a plumber. I'm just going by life experience. Right. So I hope this answers your question. So I would speak to trading standards, get a quote for the remedy from a reputable plumber, speak to trading standards, go back to the company, and if not, you have recourse via the courts. And if you need any other advice on this, I'm happy to talk to you at any time. So moving on, we don't have a lot of time left, I think about 6 minutes, but I wanted to touch on the solicitor who's been jailed for money laundering. I believe I sent you the article earlier on, Gavin. Did you have a read of that?
Yeah. Mr. McKay's been very bad, hasn't he?
Yeah. Solicitor jailed over money laundering links is struck off. Now, I get approached by clients sometimes saying, "Oh, I've got this much money. I want to buy a house, but I've got this much money, but it's cash. What do I do?" Now, this is what happens to someone who tells them what to do, right? So this guy has put his career on the line, by the looks of things, and helped some, I suppose, gangsters. It says
he effectively helped some criminals launder money through a property portfolio worth about 7.3 million, I believe.
Wow.
So he's not really done himself any favours here at all. He's knowingly accepted these funds by not asking questions about the source of funds. And that's the key thing, really. When you're taking money for anything as a solicitor or in the wider society to some extent, when you're providing professional services, is you need to know where the source of the funds are coming from, and if there's an issue there, then you have to take action under the legislation there for it. And he was happy to turn, at the very least, happy to turn a blind eye, or at the very worst, was quite happy to facilitate it and take his fees for it as a result.
I mean, I had a case a couple of years back now by a Chinese client who was buying a property for 1.2 million, and the source of those funds was coming from China. Yeah. So they were a bit, the amount of evidence that I asked for, they weren't too happy to provide, but they had to. And then also I insisted that the money should not come to me directly from China. They should get it in their own account. So that's one lot of due diligence done by their bank. And then only after that will I accept it. But again, after having going through quite a rigid process of scrutinizing the source of those funds, even in China, although I was aware that these guys are multimillionaires over there, and they were here because of that. They had visas based on that money. But yeah, we have to be careful. We can't be be lackadaisy just because we know that the guy's got a lot of money or the person's got a lot of money, so it may be okay. We have to make sure it is okay.
Yeah, exactly. We can't leave any room for manoeuvre, really, money
No,
laundering. So
no,
as a
no.
professional, you've got to be very careful about it. Otherwise, similar to this chap's situation, he could find himself with
Well,
a
he
7-year
did.
prison sentence.
Well, he acted on more than 80 property transactions for various criminals. It says, and so all of whom were subsequently convicted of offences including money laundering and fraud. So how could he not know if there's that many transactions? How could he not know? How could he not know? It's unbelievable, unbelievable.
Well, I think there's also suggestions that there were mortgage applications, but the nominees on the mortgage applications weren't the legitimate purchasers. So he was sort of knowingly doing this, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's even more than just he was negligent or he was naive. It was almost as if he just knew what he was doing, really. Apparently, the court heard that the deposits were put down on the property where the source of funds was disguised, and the mortgage applications used nominees instead of the names of the legitimate purchasers.
Mm.
He knew what he was doing, really, and he was quite right to hand his well, he didn't hand his practicing certificate back in, but he did accept what the sort of disciplinary tribunal had said, and that he ought not to practice anymore. Probably because he had absolutely no chance whatsoever of winning that. And the costs would have been even more rife to him than they already have been.
Yeah.
But losing your practicing certificates and going to court going to prison for 7 years, I mean, that's really the end of your professional
exactly.
life.
That's his livelihood gone.
Yeah.
So who knows whether he's made much from this, or whether he just thought, oh, it's an easy money spinner. Who knows? Who knows? But it's obviously not the right thing to do. Right? Have you did you see the news about the Manchester City fans full of praise for their brilliant defence? I mean, I'm not a Manchester City fan. I'm a Liverpool fan, but still,
Yeah.
they're
In this instance, their brilliant defence wasn't actually on the field; it was in the courtroom, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So they've saved them. What, 20 million was it?
$20 million in terms of fines, and has allowed them to continue to play European football in the Champions League from the next season.
Wow!
So
some good.
If you were their clients, you'd have very happy clients indeed. If you had
I wonder how much they charged.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, we'll have to leave that one there. We've only got 7 seconds, guys. I will be back next week with Black Lives Matter. So listen in next week. Thank you very much, and thank you, Gavin.
Wonderful. Thanks very much.